so common. They think that they need to wait for this perfect time. Like, I don't want to tell my kid what sex is too soon, but I don't want them to hear it from their friends. But I want to make sure that they get correct information, but not too soon where they would have heard it from their friends. I want to make sure it's like the day before they would hear it from their friends, so then they have the correct information.
Welcome to the Marriage and Motherhood Podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Perda. As a marriage coach who's married with 3 kids, I know how much parenthood could change a marriage. If flirting, laughing, and having fun together feels like a thing of the past, then I'm here to teach you that marriage doesn't have to feel so hard with your parents, and your marriage can thrive even when you're in the season of raising kids. Whether you're in a good place in your marriage and you just want to continue growing together, or you're wondering if you even like your spouse anymore, this podcast has something for you. Join me here each week as we dive into what it takes to help your marriage grow, and maybe even do a 180. You'll learn ways to handle conflict better, bring that spark back into your relationship, as well as learn how to improve other areas of your life from my lovely guest experts. Are you ready for the next stage of your life and marriage? Let's dive in. Hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Marriage and Motherhood Podcast. When I say I am super excited about today's guest, I am so excited. I have been wanting to get this woman on my show for a while, but I just kept forgetting in life, right? She got busy, I got busy. And so here's Kathleen Hema. She is a sex education advisor to parents. She makes the most epic videos for Instagram and YouTube, all about how to help you have an easier time talking about what we all know our kids are going to end up doing, what we have come to do, and that's having sex and being healthy about it and having a good conversation with our kids is the foundation of that. Because I don't know about you, but I didn't have a sex talk with my parents. It was like, yeah, you're just not going to do it. And thank goodness I had the wisdom to go to Planned Parenthood to teach myself. But anyway, here we are. Kathleen, thank you so much for being a part of the show. I cannot wait to dig into this topic with you because there are so many parents out there who don't know you and don't even think about having this conversation and how early they should actually have this conversation, and they are in for a treat. So Kathleen, can you please share who you are, how old your kids are, and how you got to do this? Because I know little Kathleen wasn't like, yeah, I want to teach about sex.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so at all. Yeah, Michelle, that was like, I don't know. That was like one of those moments where you just hear all the wonderful things about yourself and you're like, oh, that sounds really nice. Oh, that sounds like a person I want to hang out with. Oh, that's me. Oh, this is really awesome. That was like, showering with compliments. So thank you so much. I'm so excited that we finally found the time between marriage and motherhood for each of us to get onto this podcast and share this information. So yeah, my background, I have worked in public health for the past 15 years and teaching public health courses at university level, high school level, middle school, students of all ages. But now I have shifted and I am completely online and I still teach public health. I still teach public health to parents. And I focus specifically on parents because they have a really hard time talking about the topics that I talk about to their kids. And I saw from all of my education experience and teaching in the classroom that kids are craving this information and they actually do want to hear it from their parents. And parents actually do want to talk about it with their kids, but they just don't know how. And so the small area of public health that I focus on is sex education, puberty education, and child sexual abuse prevention. So that's what I do. That's what my YouTube channel, my Instagram, everything revolves around helping parents really find the words and the confidence to have these talks.
And that is so important because it is an awkward topic to talk about with your kids because, I remember when I first met you and I was like, what? Why would I talk about this with my kids unless I absolutely need to, or when I think they're of age? That's just going to make them want to do it. So can you share some myths and start debunking them? Because I know I learned so much from you. And I know a lot of moms out there are like, what? No, my kids are still so young. I only have a 4-year-old, I only have a 7-year-old, or I'll wait till they're closer to puberty. Can you share some of the misconceptions that are common amongst your clients that you hear all the time?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the one you just mentioned is so common that they think that they need to wait for this perfect time. Like, honestly, you might even have said this yourself. Like, I don't want to tell my kid what sex is too soon, but I don't want them to hear it from their friends. But I want to make sure that they get correct information, but not too soon where they would have heard it from their friends. I want to make sure it's like right, like the day before they would hear it from their friends. So then they have the correct information, right? Like,
Yeah.
like that's a
Can
lot
you
of,
just like let me know what date that is so I can do it the day before?
like, that's really hard. It's a lot of pressure on yourself. And so that's what I try and help parents with, is saying that, you know what, if you are having the talks on a regular basis, starting early, and when I say starting early, I say the primary age, and the primary age is ages 4, 5, and 6. And those talks are not even talking about sex, right? It's called sex education. I know there's like a push to rebrand that word, sex, and say, okay, well, we're not actually talking about sex at the early ages, but we're talking about consent and bodily autonomy and using medically accurate terms and talking about reproduction, because they're very interested in where babies come from and those kinds of topics. But if you can start there, and that's where I love to help parents when they find me, if we can start there, I'm going to build you to that point where you say, you know what? I don't know when my kid is going to hear sex, but I know now is the perfect time to have this talk. They are ready for this talk because everything has aligned to this point. And for me to get to the next stage of the talks that Kathleen has told me is coming up, and I know I have to do, this is the time for me to have this talk. And I think that confidence of knowing this is the perfect time, whether or not it's based off of all these other factors, because you've done all the work to get there. And I think that's what parents really love knowing and feeling when they work with me and they get to that point. They said, I had the sex talk and it was great.
Yeah, I think we can all agree as moms that we want to get ahead of them hearing about it from their friends, because we know that's not accurate, right? They learned it from some sibling or some friend, and it's just like, what? No, that is not true at all, or it's not respectful, right? And so this is not the kind of topic where it's kind of like we talk about Santa, okay? Like at the time of our recording right now, like Christmas is rolling around pretty soon. And depending on how old your kids are, they might start wondering, like, is it a thing or is it not? Right. And so it's not like one of those conversations where you wait for them to ask you, because you know what, depending on what your relationship is like, they might not ever ask you. And it might not be an obvious moment, like Kathleen is saying, where it's like, okay, it's time to talk about it. You might just have to create those opportunities. And so what are some things that parents should look out for? Readiness. It's like if there's a checklist of, oh, things I should look out for or be aware of, that'll point to the signs of, oh, it is time to start folding in some information. What would those signs be?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, it's going to be different for every parent, right? And what they've talked about and their comfort level and how they react when their kid has said something that they did not expect their kid to say. So that's a part of it. I'm going to give you a story really quick. When I was in the classroom, I used to have these things called parent nights, where all the parents would come and it was like, hey, your kid's about to have sex education. Come learn what they're going to learn in class so you can continue these talks at home. And this was for a group of 11 or 12-year-olds. And so a lot of the parents came saying, this is just way too much information. You're putting ideas into our kids' head. They are not thinking about any of this stuff. And I would have to step back and say,
But they are.
But they are, right? They are. And I know that they are because before even starting the curriculum, we give what we call an anonymous question box. And the kids write down questions and we just write, the topic is going to be sex, puberty, reproduction. What are your questions about it? And they have questions and they've heard things. And I remember one time it was just like, the question was, why is the number 69 funny? Like, like, of course, they've heard this. People laugh. They're not really sure. No one's ever really explained it. And they just want to know, why is everyone laughing at that number?
I remember in elementary school, someone asked me if I was a virgin. And I was like, what the hell does that mean? I don't know. Is that a good or bad thing to be? I have no idea.
Exactly. And they ask you and you feel like you should know, or they're already like snickering about it no matter what you say. And then you don't know if you're going to get in trouble for asking it to your parents. You don't even know if you try and maybe test it out or like say the word and you see their reaction and you're like, ooh, I don't think I was supposed to say that, right? And then you shut down, and maybe every other question after that you shut down with, you don't go to them with because you saw that little bit of a reaction. And so I think that's what I really try to help with parents is saying, when it comes to the talks, when it comes to preparing, it's really about you. I know I talk a lot about like getting your kid ready, but I work with parents to get them ready, right? Like, what are your hangups when it comes to sex? What was it that you didn't learn that has stuck with you that you're now afraid, or how you learned it and you now don't want to continue that cycle? You want to break that cycle of maybe shame or embarrassment about a topic because you don't want them to have that, or you don't want them to go through life with that same feelings.
No, and there's been so many potential or even real scary experiences because those conversations aren't happening, right? Like consent and respect on both sides, like with either partner. And so I think what you do is so great. And I just want to shout your names from the rooftop. Anytime someone's like, oh my gosh, I was like, you need to go check out her videos. Like I literally recommend your YouTube channel all the time.
Thank you.
And so, of course.
Yeah.
So what is the best age? I know you said like 4 and we start talking about like body parts, right? But like, how do we know what is age or developmentally appropriate? And how do we not share too much? Because some of it could be like, oh, interesting. And then you kind of get scared. Are they going to want to be curious about it? Like I still have those creeping thoughts in my head sometimes because like I am a very open book. So like if TMI is not your jam, listeners, you're going to want to not listen to this next part. But I use a menstrual cup, right? And I want my daughter to see that I am bleeding so that she's aware that this happens and it's very normal. I'm not in pain. I'm not injured. And this is going to happen to her, and talk to her about menstrual cycle, even though she's only 4. But I'm like, but do I let her see me remove it and insert it back in? Because then will she want to put something up her vagina? Like, so those thoughts still creep into my mind, even though I've been exposed to sex education as a parent. And so how do we navigate that? Because, we're curious people. Kids are even more curious than us.
I love that you share that. It's very open because yes, there are many different ways to collect menstrual blood. And I think you're absolutely right. The idea of taking care of our body and taking care of something that happens on a consistent basis. And our kids are coming into the bathroom, they're seeing it, but should they see it going in, or should they see it coming out? Or is that too much? Is that too little? And that really depends, right? Like it really depends on how you're going to explain it. It's not something where you're going to say, I would like for you to come into the bathroom with me and I would like for you to experience this, right? No, that's not usually how it works. But you could be at the grocery store saying, hey, there's all these different ways to collect it. And one of the ways is this tampon here, and this is inserted into the vagina. This is the pad, and this is put onto the panty in order to collect the blood, and this is based off of different preferences. Some people prefer this, other people prefer that. And when you get older, you're going to figure out what you prefer. But then I always help parents when they're thinking about, am I giving too much? Is this being too much? Is always go back to health and safety, right? The whole point of having the talks at an early age throughout childhood is that we are protecting and preventing anything negative from happening to them, right? The whole goal for the majority of the parents that reach out to me is that in the end, they want their child to have a healthy sex life, whatever that may mean, right? We want them to have a healthy sex life because sex, you talk about it on this podcast all the time. It's such an important part of this marriage, right? It's such an important part of just being human. And I think that's what we want. But we do know that there are sexual predators. We do know that there are experiences that they could have that could harm them from having this healthy sex life in the future. And so I think that's the point, right? If you kind of think of everything with that lens of, I want them to know this because I don't want them to be ashamed about it, but I also want to make sure they understand the health and safety aspect. So for mommy, this is part of taking care of my health and how I take care of the blood. This would not be something you would do because are you menstruating yet? No, right? So you're not going to insert anything into your vagina. You're not going to need to do that at all, right? And it's part of taking care of your vagina, your body parts. We don't insert anything into the openings down there. And so you then explain why, right? Why would I be telling you this? Well, you just saw mommy take it out. So I want you to be aware that this is not something. So I think if parents just couldn't put that in the back of their mind of health and safety, then you can have these conversations. Why am I afraid that if they see this, they might do this? Okay, well, I don't want them to insert anything. Okay, well, then I need to tell them that. Yes. This is something I do as an adult, not as a child. But you may do this when you're an adult, when you start menstruating. Or you may decide to use the pad that we talked about.
Yeah.
So it's something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So immediately that brings me to the topic of self-exploration. Because that is like okay, we know that they're going to do that on their own, but how do we navigate that topic? Because it's not like we're going to like give them a manual on how to do that.
Are you talking about young childhood or
no,
teen?
like puberty, kids where that becomes a topic of curiosity. Like, I'm getting urges and maybe people are talking about it, or maybe they are just wanting to explore themselves. And for the sake of like just sex in general, how we want to get ahead of teaching them before they're friends, like teaching them how to be critical thinkers, teaching them how to navigate their sexual health in a healthy way. How do we broach that topic? Because that could feel really uncomfortable, because then it's like, oh, that's a thing that's private to a lot of people. And at least for me, it's like, I would have never, ever, ever, ever talked about it. Like, I have never talked about sex once with my parents.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, yeah, we're just not going to talk about it. And, oh, now you have a child. It's like,
how did that happen?
I don't know. But like, still, like, it wasn't a topic, right? We didn't talk about fertility. We didn't talk about my period, other than like, oh, okay, well, let's get you pads.
Yep.
I didn't learn about what each phase of my cycle meant, what that's going to do to my energy levels, how to track my cervical fluid for conception, because my mom didn't even know that stuff. So like, how would she even know to teach me, right? And so I learned all of that myself, and I would say I learned it late in the game. I wish I learned it much, much earlier. So how do we navigate this sensitive topic where it does happen at a younger age than sex?
Yeah. It is a really hard topic for the majority of parents. Like, the idea of explaining sex is hard, but a lot of parents come around to it and they, all right, okay, I understand. I just had a webinar about explaining sex and I teach that often. But when it comes to masturbation, it is a topic that everybody wants to avoid. I highly encourage parents to talk about it, because you cannot jump from sex to having the porn talk without talking about masturbation. And nowadays, I think the majority of teens, we need to have a comprehensive porn and porn literacy talk. And in order to be able to have that type of talk where you're going to cover a lot and give them the information that is for their health and safety, right? And because we understand that watching a lot of porn can influence the minds of children. It can influence adults as well, because it is such a stimulant. It is such an exposure that we didn't really understand what we're seeing. And this is why it's been around for ages, right? In terms of, right now it's online porn, but there was pictures before that. And then when film came out, that was there. And then before that, you went to a place and you observed.
It's people. Like one of the oldest jobs ever.
Exactly, because it is stimulating. And so the fact now is that it's just so widespread. It's so readily available that we don't want them to get the phone and then just start watching it without understanding what it can do and how it can change their perceptions of sex in real life. I just saw a study. Oh my gosh, I don't know if this is correct, but I think I read an article saying that there are more and more ages it's dropping of like erectile dysfunction happening.
What?
It's dropping from older to younger. Like they're just having the stimulus that they need to get an erection is dropping, and they don't know exactly why. There's a lot of speculation, but they don't know exactly why. And it's not like teens. That's not the ages, but it's older men. So yes, that is happening. So coming back to masturbation, when you have the sex talk, you got to get to the porn talk, but you do have to talk about masturbation. And the reason it is hard, the reason parents struggle is because it's all pleasure. Mm-hmm. Nobody's masturbating because it doesn't feel good, right? It's all pleasure focused. And I think that is really hard for a lot of parents to say. Why do people masturbate? Because then they think, okay, do I need to explain how to masturbate? And the answer is no. You're not teaching your kid how to masturbate. You're telling them this is what it is. This is why people do it. And this is how, if you decide that you want to masturbate, how you can take care of your health, how you can take care of yourself, and make sure that you do it in a way that is healthy for you, right? It's in a private boundaries. All of those things go into place. And so I think when I break it down for parents like that, I have a Top Talks course where it's sex, masturbation, and porn. And also puberty is being added in January of 2025. And also relationships, because we need to start talking about sexuality as well. Yeah. When they get into it and they break it down like that, they're like, this wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be.
No, I think the greatest lesson I learned from watching your videos and attending different seminars is I think we need to take a step back and own what our fears are around it so that we can gain some awareness. Because if we just keep it all in our heads, it's like so overwhelming and it causes a lot of anxiety. But the fact is, we're just sharing information. It's just facts. We're not telling them how to be a lover. We're just giving them values to live by and things to consider when they're put in this situation so that they know what they want to do in accordance to their own values and well-being and all that. It's not like teaching them how to cook. It's like, okay, step by step, this is what you do. Like, we didn't get that and we managed. They're going to figure it out themselves too, but at least give them that foundational knowledge so they can make the best possible decision for themselves.
That's the goal. I mean, that is it right there, is making sure they have medically accurate information, first of all, and it is given to them in an age-appropriate way that they can digest it, right? They can digest that information at 7. You can add on to it by 11, and then you give them more information by 13. And then you say, you know what? I have given you the crux to taking care of your health. Here are some websites. Here is some information. You're heading into the teenage adult years. So you're going to now need to search for that information yourself. But of course, I'm always here if you have questions or concerns. I will always want to help you. But it's getting them to the point where they now are able to think at any point, am I making a decision that affects my health? Is this a decision that is going to put me at risk, put my partner at risk? Is this something I really want to do? Or am I feeling pressured to do it? Where is this coming from? We're trying to help them because the kids nowadays are going to be so much more inundated with so many more messages so quickly that you being that anchor that they know they can always come to when all of the other stuff is whirling around them, and they know they're going to get information from you that's going to help them.
Yeah. And I want to highlight what Kathleen was saying, because as she was explaining how to do this, you notice that she's saying different ages, right? So this is not like a one conversation kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So like take that pressure off of yourself to get it all done in like one conversation. This is just like lots of tiny different conversations. And it doesn't even have to be anything super serious, right? We're like, okay, let's sit down and talk about this thing, right? It could just be in passing.
Absolutely. And that's the best, actually, is when you are prepared, and this is My goal is parents come into my course and they feel so prepared because you're not learning everything. All right. If you've got a kid that's 8, you don't need to worry about the porn talk right now. You need to focus on the sex talk and making sure that you are able to convey this in a way that they understand, and that they understand this is not something children do, and that they can protect themselves, right? If someone says, I want to tickle your vulva, they are like, whoa, touching my vulva is not okay.
It's not okay.
Or I just want to kiss it. No, that's oral sex. And no, I've already know this, right? So them that information where they feel empowered. And so
Yes.
if parents know, okay, these are the talks I need to have this year, all right? And if I have these ones this year, that will prepare me for this one's next year. And then I can start focusing on that stuff later on. It gives you that sense of, okay, it's not so much. And then you look for those teachable moments, right? You look for that sign or that song that comes on or something like that. It was actually really funny the other day. I have an 8-year-old, and there was a song, but it was the explicit version of Eminem's new song. It's not new anymore. It's Houdini, right? That one. I accidentally had it playing. He goes like, I don't know, F them, F them, F them, F my kids, they're brats, right? And just before that started, she goes, Mom, can you change the song? And I was like, oh, why? I like this song. And then it came on. She goes, I go, yes, I forgot. I'm so sorry. We don't have to listen to that. She's like, I just don't really like hearing the curse words. I was like, yes, I'm so sorry. I totally forgot. And then I explained how there's versions of the song that are explicit, versions that are not explicit. And why do they do that? Because there are different people. There's people who don't mind hearing that word. There's people who do mind hearing that word. And I feel bad that you asked me to change it and that I didn't, and that affected you. And next time, absolutely.
Yeah.
I will do that.
I think that's a good story because you just taught your daughter, hey, when you set a boundary, people should respect that and you deserve to have your boundary respected. And that can span across multiple situations, especially sexual ones, right? You're like, hey, I said I'm not ready, or hey, I said not today.
Mm-hmm.
And you're pushing. No, I've been taught in my own household that my word and my boundaries are respected. So if you're not gonna, then goodbye.
Exactly. And I think the first time the song came on and it was that word, we had already had a discussion about curse words and what they are because she'd been hearing them. I mean, she's 8.
Yeah.
Most 8-year-olds are aware that there's curse words. And so it was just another thing that she now understands what it means. And she's like, you know what? I just don't like it. And I'm like, yes, absolutely. And I think that's the part of it when you know that it's okay to have these conversations. When you know that it's age appropriate at this age, you'll take that teachable moment opportunity and just go with it. And that is the beauty of having these little talks throughout the years. So by getting involved, by taking a webinar or taking a course, you then have that lined up. And you can say, you know what? All right, I'm good. I just have to worry about this year. And then I can get through it, right? And then we check in. Maybe halfway through the year, you're still like, I haven't had an opportunity. I'm like, really? You haven't had an opportunity? Let's find a way to get this opportunity going.
Yeah. And, you know, same thing goes for talking about anything, right? So, like, I help couples who struggle with communication, right? So, like, at first, if you're not well-versed on healthy communication skills, it's going to feel very overwhelming, just like this. Right. But as you gain the skills and you try different ways of going about it, you get that under your belt and you're like, okay, I've got experience now. You feel more confident. It doesn't feel so scary. It just becomes another thing. And the only reason why talking about sex is so intimidating is because society has told us that it's not something to talk about. Well, now we're saying, let's flip it because we want to prepare our kids to have the best possible experience ever. Obviously, we can't shield them from everything, but our job as parents is to be that guide, to be like, hey, you want to drive here? Look for this marker, turn right. Okay, that destination is adulthood. And you don't want to say, okay, I want my future adult children to have an awful sex life. You wouldn't say that. But
Right.
just because they're kids right now, you're like, no, I don't want to talk about that. Well, guess what? They are future adults, and we need to equip them with the knowledge to make good decisions for themselves so that they can have respectful partners and have a really great sex life, because that would be awful if our experiences became their experiences or worse.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't wish that on my kid. I mean, not to say I had like a terrible experience, but it could have definitely been better and more informed. And I'll be damned if I repeat that with my kids.
Exactly. I mean, so many parents are like, my parents didn't talk about this with me and I turned out okay. I'm like, yeah, you turned out okay. And it was a different time back then. But can we like try? Can we just try and
Also,
see
like,
what
are
happens?
we okay with just okay for our kids?
I know we're not okay with just okay for like so many other aspects of our kids' lives, right? Like we want them to be in every sport, playing every instrument. We're willing to give them all this exposure. And then when it comes to this topic, something that is personal to them, they're interested in, it's their body, and we shut down. And why? It's because our discomfort with it, when we can work on that. And that's what I kind of mentioned is you work with these parents on building a better marriage, because I think for a lot of us, we didn't see a great marriage growing up and we don't know what that's like.
Yeah, and talking about our feelings, it's like the same thing. It's like if you were not taught how to process your feelings and understand them, it's going to be really difficult for you to talk about that or even hear about it. And so you don't, because it's uncomfortable. Same thing with sex. What if we just remove the discomfort and work through that so that it's just yet another topic, like you're teaching them how to drive?
Exactly. That's my goal. That's what I would love that.
Yeah, I mean, it's so important because you don't want anything horrible to happen to your kids, and you also don't want them to go around life feeling clueless, right? So tell me, what is the best age to start actually talking about sex? So we talked about kind of alluding to parts, right? But what is the actual age to start talking about the act of sex?
Yeah. So to give you some perspective on how I answer this question, because it's a question I get all the time. I've been working in sex education for over 15 years. And what sets me apart from sex therapists or child psychologists or child development specialists or even academic researchers who research comprehensive sex ed is that I take all of that high level cognitive stuff that is the health guidelines and science-based recommendations, and I combine that with my in the classroom experience of what kids actually asked in the classroom, and I break it all down for parents. And so this is what I mean by this, is that when a kid goes to ask a question about sex, like what is sex? In our adult mind, we think, okay, maybe they're not ready for this, right? They've heard this word, but they're not actually ready for the definition. Well, what I do is I tell you, hey, you know what? Here are what the guidelines say. The guidelines say that by the age of 8, all kids need to know that sperm and egg come together in order for a baby to be made. All right? That is just...
I'm behind. I have an 8-year-old. I have not said that.
Now you know.
Yeah.
That needs to happen in order for them to understand, because the guidelines then say, and every country has guidelines, by the way, like the United States, Canada, UK, Australia, but a lot of them will base it off of the World Health Organization's guidelines because they have a very comprehensive research that has gone in, and they look at it from not just sex, but human rights perspective when it comes to sex education. So I base mine off of World Health Organization because I work with parents all over the world, but I have looked at how they all align to some of the major Western countries, the US, that's where I'm from, Canada, UK, and Australia. Sperm and egg must come together. So they need to know that by 8. And then in the World Health Organization's guidelines, it says between 9 and 12, they need to recall that a baby can be made from sexual intercourse. And I was like, they need to recall. When did you tell them? When did you tell them? Right? At 9, they're recalling it, but at 8, they only know sperm and egg. And so there's a lot of information that's out there that never actually says, here is the age to explain it. right? And so that's what I do is I break that all down for parents. And I say, here is why they're saying by 8, they need to know this. And this is based off of reproduction. Then it goes into child sexual abuse prevention. And then it goes into sexual violence and things like that. And here's where it says this next part. And so I think that when parents come to me and they say, okay, what's the best age? I go, okay, I'm not going to tell you one age. I'm going to give you an age range. And the age range for explaining sex, and this is vaginal, anal, and oral. And I know there's more than those types of sex. We all know that. We're adults. But for a child, this is what they need to know for sexual abuse prevention, is anywhere between the intermediate age, ages 7 and 9. And this aligns with what we know about child sexual abuse. According to the Department of Justice, most kids who experience child sexual abuse will experience it between 7 and 13. That's the age range. And so if they're going into age 7 and then they're at the highest risk for the next 7 years, but they don't know what sex is, what service are we doing for our children, right? So I think helping parents to say, all right, I am lining up this talk, I'm getting ready, they're turned 7, I know this talk is coming. And then how do I get myself ready? How do I know that they're ready? Because remember, they're always thinking, okay, but I want to tell it before they hear it from their friends.
Yes.
Right? Like, and so, it's getting to that point of just making it methodical and saying, okay, this is the recommendation between 7 and 9. And this comes from the experts who have studied it. And this is what they recommend across the world. And here is what I come in and say, here is my recommendations, and here's how to go about actually saying this. And this is why I say to say it like this. And that's what I help parents do. So it sounds like you haven't had this talk.
No, I haven't. I've talked about you need a woman and a man to make. So like me and his dad made them. And that I birthed them out of my vagina. Like they didn't get cut out of my stomach, because I think that's what's often thought, right? It's like, oh, but how else do you get it out? Like, well, that's how you got it out. And I've talked about my vulva to my daughter, hygiene-wise, okay, like rinse it, whatever. So I'm constantly using that word with her. Her brother hears it because we're all in the bathroom getting ready at the same time. But I have not actually talked about sperm at all with him. And so I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't realize that I haven't had that conversation with him before, because he's of the age where, it's making involuntary movements, and he's asked questions about it. And I'm like, oh yeah, that means blood's rushing to it. And that's why you got to point it down when you go pee. Like you just never know where it's going to go. And
please don't mess up the bathroom, because then you have to clean it up, and then
oh yeah, he knows because he doesn't want to clean the bathroom. And neither do I when that is done. But that kind of brings up my second question is, kids love to share what they learn with their friends. So do you add in like a little like side note, like, okay, just so you know, like this is this, or do you not?
So this is super common. So many parents are so worried that they're going to explain this to their kid, and then their kid's going to tell all the other kids in class.
Or tell their parents, and parents are going to get mad at you.
And then the parents are going to hear about this. They're going to come to you and be like, what were you telling your kid? And this is what they told my kid, and this is not okay. We are not talking about this. And then the parents get flustered. And so, of course, I don't want that to happen. I really do want every kid to hear about sex and learn what it is from their parents, because it helps to build that communication. It helps to make it so that they feel comfortable coming with their next question, because it's not the end of the talks. Explaining what is sex is not the end. It's just the beginning, actually, because you got a whole lot of other things.
Much more.
To cover. So when it comes to that, what I try to do with parents is give them the confidence to say, okay, yes, I know that this is right for my kid. I know that this is the time. And that they tell their kid, you know what, I know that this is right for you. I want you to have this information, blah, 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 because I know the reason why they want to have these talks. But some of your friends, some of their parents may be waiting a little bit longer. They may not be ready to have this talk with your friends yet. And we want to give them time. We want to give them time to have this conversation. So It's not really a topic that we go and talk about at recess or in the lunchroom. And we just want to give them time to have this. And there will be sex ed at school happening. I'm not sure. It's maybe next year, the year after, or something like that. But we don't want to infringe upon those families having this conversation with their kids. So I'm just going to ask you to not share this information. But here's the caveat. You want to empower them. You want them to say, you have correct information. If you ever hear anybody talking about it and it's incorrect information, please go and correct them because you have the correct information. We don't want misinformation being spread.
Right.
So that's
okay.
A lot of parents find that very helpful.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. And it kind of reminds me of what we've told our son about Santa, because he started like asking questions last year, right? And I'm like, okay, you are old enough to know now. I'm going to let you in on a secret, and we told him like, it's the spirit and we all get to play that. And now you're part of that club. And a lot of people your age may or may not know. And so we're going to keep the magic alive for them in case they haven't started asking. Okay. So like, go along with it. Don't mention it, So it kind of reminds me of that. Like, just be respectful of people's, like, wherever they're at, and don't like guess what I know?
Right.
Tell you all the things.
And you know what? The thing that really, I think, changes for a lot of parents when they start having these talks is that they realize that it is just kind of mundane conversation to their kids because they've been having it for so long. Like saying the word vulva or vagina. I read a story to my kids the other night about like stranger danger. It was like a Bernstein Bear book. And it was like, be wary of strangers. And in that book, at the very end, it talks about like these tips for young cubs, young children. And one of them is your private parts are your parts, right? And I was like, yes. And my little one who is 6, she was just like, so yeah, my private parts are mine. That means no one can touch it. And my older one was like, and kiss it, because I had the sex talk with my older one. Good. And she was like, ew, why would anybody kiss it? And I was like, okay, yes, that is right. No kissing, no touching, no tickling. We went into tickling right away. But it's one of those things where she felt so empowered by knowing that information.
That's amazing.
It was just like, I want you to know this information too. And at that time you could be like, oh my God, my kid shouldn't know that just yet. Or you just go along with it because I've talked about it so much with her. That's just the normal conversation part of it. Right.
Oh, I love that. And your daughter probably felt so good. Like, I want to protect my sister.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what we want. We want them to feel empowered to make decisions and to know that they're making healthy decisions. I think that's, I think we want.
Awesome. Okay. So where can people connect with you? Where's the best place?
Yes. So I am on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. So if you follow me on TikTok and Instagram, I would say that is a great place to get like tidbits of information. That's my like edutainment. I try to just throw something out in 30 seconds. I don't do anything long form on there. So if you want to hear how I break something down and give you like bit by bit information, kind of like what we've done on this podcast, then I would say go to my YouTube. And it's great to get tips from Instagram or be reminded of something, and then subscribe to my YouTube channel to get more in-depth information when a question comes up and you're like, ooh, how do I answer that? I probably have it on my YouTube channel.
And she does, like literally, like every question I've ever thought of and ones that I didn't think to think of are on there. So definitely go check out her YouTube platform and follow her on TikTok or Instagram, whichever one you like to go on.
Yeah.
Kathleen, you are such a wealth of knowledge. And I so appreciate you being a guest here, because I know so many people are going to be like, oh, I need to learn more. And they're going to be searching your name. So go find her information in the show notes. Okay. Go check her out, send her a message, say, hey, I found you on Michelle's podcast, and ask her all the things and work with her. And yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and your insight. I know I threw a lot of like personal things at you. So like I had selfish reasons for having you on the show.
It's all good. I'm happy that the selfish reasons brought me here and I get to talk to you and all of your friends. And I've known you for a while. So this has been really lively to reconnect. And I'm excited for you. 4 is such a great age. And don't discount 8. 8 is such a great age. I have been finding that the talks are really blossoming with my 8-year-old. And I can see it starting to change. And that's why I'm starting to think we need to have these relationships. And it's not just sexual relationships. That's not what it is at 8. It's more about friendships. And that's the part that I think a lot of parents struggle on. Crushes, relationships, friendships, best friends. How do we talk about love in a way that is not always sex related with our young kids, right? So that's coming.
My 8-year-old actually just told me 2 days ago that he thinks a girl in his class has a crush on him and likes him. I was like, oh, and what makes you think that? What is she doing? Just to kind of I was like, okay, well, what did you say? Nothing. I was like, okay, yeah, don't make her feel bad about it or anything. Just keep being you,
Yeah. And this is so common, right? It's those notes back in 3rd grade. Do you like me? Check yes.
Check yes or no.
Right? Right. And we laugh about it, but it's part of being human and it's part of our sexuality
of that time, right? It feels really important at that time.
And it totally is. It is totally about building that trust and everything. And so I'm super excited because I've been going through this same exact thing with my own 8-year-old. And that's what's inspired me to really dive into talking about this and helping parents navigate this, what I'm calling the relationships talk.
It's so important. I mean, you're building the foundation for their future partnership. And, I'm all about that. So thank you.
Awesome. Oh, this has been lovely, Michelle. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I'm so glad to have you. And so listeners, thank you for making it all the way to the end. I hope that you're walking away from this episode feeling so inspired, so confident to tackle this topic. And go check out Kathleen, go learn some more. She is literally full of information that can be so, so helpful to help ease this potentially intimidating conversation for you. And let her know that you found her from here. If you know someone that could benefit from listening to this episode, share it, be a friend. And if you love this show, I would love it if you would leave a review and a rating on iTunes and Spotify. I would be so, so happy. I love reading your reviews and knowing how much I am impacting you in a positive way. And that's it. Have a good one. And I will catch you back here on the next episode. Bye. That's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. If you did, please send me a message over on Instagram at Michelle Perta Coaching to let me know what you loved most about it. Hearing from my listeners is my absolute favorite. And if you've been loving this podcast, please leave a rating and review. This will help people like you find the show and get the help they need. Catch you here on the next episode. Bye.